I'm a park ranger who got promoted to Cryptid Hunter. I wanted to post this so people would know what happened. So the real truth would be known no matter what official sources might say. I'm a pretty reasonable guy, or at least I think so. I've worked in a state park for years now, and I have yet to come across any problems I couldn't handle. Until the day my boss approached me with an unusual request. Being the calm, cool individual that I am, I replied in my usual low-key style. "You want me to what?" I said, trying to keep my voice under control so my boss didn't fire me. "Look, I know this is weird," Ken said. "I'm having a little problem with it myself, but if it's true, we need to do something." "But why me?" "Because you're our best tracker." "I'm 5'4", weigh 130 pounds soaking wet, and you want me to go out and track down..." I lowered my voice so it would stay confined to the boss's office. "An imaginary creature that could be twice or 3 times my size?" "I don't know," he said. "That's the thing. No matter how much research I do, there's always another expert with conflicting information." "That's because it's all made up," I said. "Stories passed down from one generation to the next until someone decided to make some money by writing a book about it or filming a blurry video. Then all bets were off." Ken sighed. "I don't disagree with you. And if you go out there and find it's a rogue mountain lion or bear, I'll be the first one to congratulate you. It's just, we have to do something. 5 hikers have gone missing, vanished without a trace, and that's just in the last 2 weeks. We have to at least show the public that we're trying." It was my turn to sigh. "I understand that, but who cooked up this cockamamie idea of cryptids hunting hikers in the park?" "It was Glenn who first told me he had seen something strange," he said. "At first, I blew it off as ridiculous, just like you did. But the more he told me, the more I thought this might need looking into." "Well, if you're going to make me do this, you may as well give me Glenn as a partner." "I was thinking the same thing. Since he found the tracks and seems to be pretty well versed in this cryptid crap, it only makes sense." "Nothing about this makes sense," I said. "I know, but I appreciate you taking one for the team." Yeah, I said, waving him off. "Just make sure you tell Glenn I'm in charge." "Absolutely, and you can call me anytime if you need extra help." "Extra help?" I said. "To track down something that doesn't exist? I think I've got it handled." "Good luck." I shook my head as I stepped out into the cool autumn air. September had been unseasonably warm, but the last week had brought cooler weather and the threat of early winter. In other places, that might not be such a problem. But here in the mountains, snow could be deadly. I wasn't looking forward to winter in the least. But then, I never do. I looked out over the foothills of the mountain that were still green but had just a hint of the leaves about to change. I knew that soon, this would be one of the most beautiful places on Earth. I found Glenn out on the trail. He was bent over, examining the ground when I walked up. He stood and looked down at me. At 6'2", he towered over me, and even though he never said anything about it, I always got the feeling it gave him a superior feeling. Maybe it was just me. "Hey," he said. "Hey back. You find something here?" "I can't be sure." It looks like a track, but it's weird. I bent down and took a look. It's a bear, I said after a quick glance. Are you sure? 100%. I'm not so sure, he said, bending down again. It's a bear, I said more forcefully. What's your problem? He said, standing up so I would have to look up at him. My problem is getting sent out of this wild cryptid chase, I said. You know they don't exist, right? He glared at me. Are you going to be like this whole time? He said. Because if so, then Ken needs to find me another assistant. Assistant? I said. Didn't he call you? No. Well, I guess you missed the memo, I said. I'm the one in charge of this investigation. He laughed. I'll just bet Ken put you in charge. What's that supposed to mean? I'm the best tracker around here. Yeah, you're a legend in your own mind. Call Ken, I said. I don't need to call him. Yes, you really do, I said, holding out my phone. Fine. He took the phone and dialed the number. I enjoyed watching his face fall by degrees as the conversation went on its very short course. He hung up and tossed the phone back, looking like he had just sucked on a lemon. So, where do we start, boss? He said, venom dripping from every word. Where did you find the original tracks that started all this? Just down the trail a ways. Let's go. We proceeded down the trail. He seemed to be slouching, as if he was a little kid sulking, because someone had taken his favorite toy. He did get his petty little revenge, though. As he led the way, he took fast, long strides, forcing me to nearly run to keep up. I didn't want to say anything, because that meant he'd won. But I wasn't sure how long I could keep up the track meet, especially going up and down the hills on the trail. When he finally stopped, I was winded, but I did all I could not to let him see. I took long, slow breaths, even though my lungs were screaming for air. He glanced at me. You okay? He said. Fine, I said, not giving him the satisfaction. Where are these tracks? He pointed them out, and I bent down to get a closer look. I said. Let me guess, he said in his most sarcastic voice. It's a bear. Definitely not, I said, looking up at his face that was filled with surprise. It looks like something else. I'm not sure exactly what. What do you mean? I mean, at first glance, it looks like a mountain lion, but the shape is a little different. So it's a cryptid print, he said, nearly bouncing on his toes. Slow down there. All I said was the shape was a little different, I said. That's not exactly concrete evidence. But it's something. Yeah, it's something, but we don't know what yet. Well, let's find some more tracks, he said, looking around at the ground. I've already found some more, but they all look like these, I said. They must have been made by the same animal. It's not an animal, he said defensively. Okay, look, I get it. You're young, and you haven't been here very long. What, like a year now? 10 months. You want to prove yourself, I said. And that's great. But we need to take this slow and be sure of what we find. Otherwise, we'll end up in one of the tabloids as the idiots who searched for the invisible cryptid. He stepped back and sighed deeply. I understand. Okay, so now let's take a slow approach and find out what really happened without tainting the evidence with a premature perception. "All right," he said. "The animal tracks go away from the trail. Do they look like there was a struggle here?" "Not really," I said, examining them. "So this might not be whatever took the hikers. It might be another animal just crossing the path." "You're right. Where were the hikers last seen?" "On this trail, a little further down. But nobody seems to know if they doubled back and came through here a second time." I stood and brushed my uniform off. "Let's head that way then." I started out and he fell in step beside me, matching my pace. It was nice to be able to go at my own speed. As we got closer, I stopped and looked up at the trees. "You hear that?" I said. He cocked his head for a moment. "I don't hear anything," he said. "That's exactly my point. We should be hearing birds and all kinds of wildlife, but we aren't." "What's that mean?" I paused and looked him in the eye. "It means there's a predator nearby." We both took a long, close look all around. The thing is, when you're in a forest, there are 1,000 places to hide. There could be a creature sneaking up on us only a few feet away, and we wouldn't know until it was too late. "Come on," I said. "Let's get to where we need to be." I won't lie. I picked up the pace a bit, and my eyes were constantly searching the trees. Glenn was on such full alert that he nearly tripped and fell twice. It didn't take us long to get to the spot. As we approached, we saw an older man standing there, staring at the trees. He seemed disheveled and dirty. It was clear that he wasn't a recreational hiker. He was something else. "Excuse me, sir," I said. "Do you hike through here often?" "Why?" he said quickly, his eyes darting back and forth between us. "This park is public land. I can come and go as I please, and you can't stop me." The entire time he was talking, he was also pointing a wrinkled finger in my face. "We're not here to harass you or tell you what you can and can't do," Glenn said. "We're looking for some hikers who went missing." His face brightened. "Why didn't you say so?" he said. "Sure, I saw some hikers go through here the other day." "Do you remember around what time it was?" I said. "It was midday, I know that much," he said. "I don't have much use for a watch anymore." "Did you see how many hikers there were?" Glenn said. 3, I think. 2 women and a man." "Anything else you can tell us about them?" I said. "They were young, probably in their 20s, he said. "They looked good." "What do you mean?" I said. "They looked good," he said, glancing toward the trail. "You know, they were attractive kids, the kind you'd see in magazine commercials." Glenn and I exchanged glances. "Do you live around here?" Glenn said. The man stepped back and seemed to take a defensive stance. "I thought you said you weren't here to harass me." "We're not," I said slowly. "We're just asking some questions. You're free to leave any time." "I want to leave," he said, pushing through us and heading down the trail. "Have a nice day, sir," I called after him. He didn't turn and look back, and in an instant, he was out of sight. Glenn stepped over to me. "What do you think?" he said. "I think he knows more than he's saying," I said, staring at the empty trail. "They looked good," Glenn said. "You caught that too?" I said. That seemed a little odd. "I think he might be our killer," Glenn said. "You really think he could have taken on 3 20-somethings by himself?" "Not in that form." "Here we go," I said, rolling my eyes. "Skinwalkers can change shape." "What the hell is a skinwalker?" "It's a shapeshifter," he said. They turn into animals when they hunt. That's convenient, I said. So now we are hunting an animal that isn't an animal, but looks just like other animals. So if we come across it, how will we know if it's him or just some other random animal? Glenn stared at me. I don't know. Well, I'm glad you thought it through, I said, starting back up the trail. Where are you going? He called after me. To ask that old man some more questions. He shook his head and took one more look around the area. For some reason, being surrounded by trees made him suddenly uncomfortable. He saw the hundreds of hiding places where a predator could be sitting, waiting. He trotted off after me. When he rounded the corner, he nearly trampled me as I stood in the middle of the trail. What the? He said, before following my eyes to see why I had stopped. There was a mountain lion, standing in the middle of the trail staring at us and showing its teeth. That's him, he whispered in my ear, making me jump. Him who? I said, annoyed. The old man. Are you nuts? I whispered. He's in his animal form, Glenn said. That's why he's looking so aggressive at us. He's looking so aggressive at us because we're his weekly snack. The entire time we were talking, I was slowly reaching for my gun. Once it had cleared the holster, I flicked off the safety and slowly drew it up. Don't shoot him, Glenn said. We need to find out where the hikers are. I'm not going to shoot him, I said, raising the gun slowly in the air and pulling the trigger. The gunshot echoed all through the hillside. The effect was instant. The mountain lion bolted down the trail like its tail was on fire. Why'd you do that? Glenn said. Because I didn't want to get eaten, I said, sliding my gun into its holster. We needed to get him to tell us where the hikers are. I stared into his eyes. My incredulous feeling couldn't stay hidden any longer. That was not the old man, I yelled. That was a mountain lion. It's his cryptid form, he said, causing me to walk away in disgust. He followed behind me, each of us frustrated because the other was being so stupid and couldn't see the truth. When we got back to the truck, I drove to the station. The sun was sitting on the horizon, waiting to drop behind the mountain. We drove in silence. When we got there, we each got into our personal vehicles and drove away. I got home and threw myself on the couch. I grabbed a pillow from beside me and held it against my face while I screamed in frustration. After I was done, I sat there for a while. Eventually, I got up, went over to the computer, sighed, and typed in cryptids. The next morning, Glenn and I got to the ranger station door at the same time. We each stood there, holding our coffee like some Old West standoff, until finally I pulled the door open and he walked inside. How'd you two make out yesterday? Ken said when he saw us. It was... Glenn started. Bullshit, I thought. Stupid, pointless, annoying. Challenging, he said. Ken looked at me and I shrugged. So, we're no closer to finding those hikers? Ken said. We do have one lead, Glenn said. No, we don't, I said. We have a suspect, he said, as if I hadn't spoken. No, we don't. Because my partner allowed him to get away. Because he's not a suspect. He's just some old man. Who can turn into a predator. No, he can't. Ken had been watching us go back and forth like a tennis match until he had had... "Enough!" he yelled, drawing the attention of the rest of the Rangers in the room. "You two, my office, now," he said, then marched towards his door. We followed along, not saying a word. Once we were in the office, Ken slammed the door closed. "What the hell is wrong with you two?" he said. "I gave you a job. Find the hikers. You seem to have heard, act like two toddlers in a playground fighting over a ball." "He wanted to accost this old guy who looked like he was homeless," I said. "He was a skinwalker. I know it," Glenn said. "Okay, this has to stop," Ken said. "You need to accept that he is in charge," he said, pointing to me. "And you need to accept that there might be something to his theory," he said to me, "regardless of whether you believe it or not." Glenn and I stared at each other with mutual distrust. "Enough," Ken said. "Work together or I'll fire you both. Got it? Now get the hell out of my office." We both turned and reached for the door at the same time. He beat me to it and wore a smug expression as he opened the door. It was my turn to wear the expression when he opened the door, and I walked through. The rest of the Rangers who had been hovering nearby to hear what was happening scattered when we came out, and suddenly decided they had things to do out of the office. "What's your plan for today, big man?" Glenn said. I ignored the obvious short joke and turned to face him. "Dogs," I said. "Dogs? We should get some search dogs out there." He opened his mouth and then got a thoughtful look. "That's actually a good idea." "Thanks. Why don't you see if you can find some search and rescue dog units nearby?" "Why me?" "Because I'll be at the police department doing a composite sketch of our old man to hand out to people so we can find him and question him further," I said. "I mean, after all, he's our only suspect." Glenn gave me the slightest grin. "Sounds good," he said, heading for his desk as I went for the door. 2 hours later, I had a composite sketch that was a good resemblance of the man. I drove back to the station and found Glenn had been busy. "I found a team, and they said they can be here tomorrow morning," Glenn said. "Great," I said, showing him the composite sketch. "That looks just like him," he said. "I'll make some copies." While I was there, I mentioned our missing hikers and checked to see if they had any missing persons reports. I said. They gave me info on the 3 reports they had gotten yesterday. I laid the folder on the desk beside the copier and spread the papers out so he could see them. "What are we looking for?" Glenn said. "Not sure. Anything that might give us some clue as to what happened." "They got lost or attacked," he said. "Did they? What makes you so sure that one of them didn't come along thinking of something other than a hike in the woods?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if something went wrong?" "Like what?" "Could be anything," I said. "You never know what could set someone off. Lovers' quarrel, jealousy, being the butt of endless jokes." Glenn looked down at me and opened his mouth as if to say something. "It's good to see you two finally working together," Ken said, looking at our progress. "Yeah," Glenn said. "It's great to trust each other enough to work as a team." I smiled and nodded. Glenn found some search dogs. They'll be here tomorrow morning. And I had a composite sketch done of the old man from yesterday. "I thought you said he wasn't a suspect," Ken said. "Right now, he's all we have," I said, looking at Glenn. Glenn nodded. "Have you contacted any of the families?" Ken said. "Not yet," I said. "I figured we'd see what the dogs found first. If they strike out, we might have to call the families to get more info. But at this point, I wouldn't want to get their hopes up." "Sounds good," he said. "I'll leave you to it." As he walked away, Glenn said, "I appreciate you backing my theory. I looked up cryptids online last night." "Really?" he said, brightening. "What did you find?" "A lot of crackpot theories." His face fell. "But I also found some things that were interesting enough to think you might be right." "There's some interesting stuff out there." "And those skinwalkers are scary as hell." "Maybe we should be carrying some more firepower." I looked at him for a moment. "Couldn't hurt," I said with a shrug. We went to the armory and grabbed the only remaining shotgun. It seemed like the other rangers had the same idea. We searched other trails around the area, avoiding the one the dogs would search in the morning to reduce the chance of us contaminating the scent. At the end of the day, we each went home to get some sleep. Tomorrow was going to be a big day. The handlers met us bright and early, with their dogs raring to go. Glenn tried to pet one and nearly lost some fingers. "Yeah, I wouldn't do that again," the handler said. "They're not the friendliest of animals." The dog he tried to pet reinforced his handler's statement by staring at Glenn and growling softly. "Enough," the handler said, rubbing the dog's fur. "He's on our side." We showed them the trail, and they took the lead. The dog sniffed all over the trail, all the way down to where we first saw the old man. At that point, it was like someone just gave them a triple shot of caffeine. They raced up the hillside, practically dragging their handlers. It was all Glenn could do to keep up. I'm ashamed to say I fell behind. Climbing a steep hillside isn't something I do every day. I was keeping up until the first time I slipped and nearly rolled down the hill. It was then that I traded speed for caution. When I got to the top, the dogs had found 3 tents. No one was looking into them. They were just looking at them. Even the dogs were pulling to get away from the tents. Their handlers had to tie them to trees to keep from getting dragged back down the hill. I looked from face to face and saw fear. "What happened?" I said to Glenn. "We solved the case," he said, looking ashen. I looked at him questioningly, and he just walked away. I took the initiative and opened the flap of the closest tent. I wish I hadn't. The flies and the stench of decay hit me at the same time. I nearly lost my breakfast. Begrudgingly, I went to the next 2 tents and found a similar scene. No one else seemed to want to do anything other than get as far away from the tents as possible. So I picked up my radio and called Ken. "We found your hikers," I said. "They're all dead."